Do you get the sense as you travel the country, talk to people, speak, that we're on it feels like we're on the cusp of chaos?
I think we're on the cusp of something. I'd like to think of it as a revolution in a positive sense of that word. I think that, I try to be an optimist at times.
But you do feel like this is...
Oh, there's something going on. I mean, I think we're like in a 1775, spring of 1776 moment in this country, actually. I think that people are hungry. Now, the form I want to see it play out in is reviving those shared ideals that unite us, that set the nation into motion in 1776, that I think are innate to our nature as human beings, as Americans. I think that there's a hunger for a revival of those ideals. That's where we are, but there's a lot of ways that energy could go. The way I would like to play my small role in helping channel that energy, it's not all going to be done by the U.S. president, but there's a role to play, is to channel that energy towards a positive revival of that which unites us across our diverse attributes or divides. But if it doesn't go that way, there's a dam that's going to break and the river's going to go somewhere. I hope it leads towards a national revival rather than, other places where this could go.
How concerned are you about a real economic reset in the next year?
Quite concerned. I think that 2024 is going to be a year where it's not going to take a lot of guts for me to make this prediction, because I'll tell you why it's easy to make. We're on the cusp of a major economic downturn next year. We live under conditions of a deeply inverted yield curve. I mean, these are topics that may put people to sleep, and so we don't have to
Can you explain
get into it. Yeah, I mean, it's basically you would expect in the long run, right? Long run interest rates on long run bonds are higher compared to interest rates on short run bonds because there would be higher risk of being repaid back. That's how things are supposed to work. There are a wide range of factors that can occasionally cause that to tilt in the other direction. We're in one of those conditions right now where the interest rates on short-term bonds are significantly higher than they are on long-run bonds. And every time that's happened in the last 40 years, that has predicted a recession that followed in the year or so that came later. And there's lots of complicated reasons for why, and economists can debate it. But what's not debatable is that that's exactly what happens. That's where we are now, which is why I think in the calm before the storm, Biden will put up low unemployment numbers. Well, that misses the point that we have a deeper structural deficiency where our real problem is there are twice as many jobs open as there are people looking for work.
Right.
That's the actual deeper structural failure as it relates to the labor market.
People have stopped looking for work.
People have stopped looking for work. Absolutely. I mean, people are being paid more or have been habituated more to staying at home than to go to work. People also don't have the skill sets required to actually show up to work because they have four-year college degrees that were subsidized by the U.S. Department of Education without actually having the skill sets that many employers badly need in order to grow their business, whether it's a big business or a small one. The inflation numbers, they'll point to saying, hey, the rate of inflation's coming down. Inflation's cumulative. Things are still 16, 20% more expensive than they were in 2020, and wages have not gone up in the same way over the same period. And so there are deep structural issues with our economy. I mean, the national debt, interest payments are going to be the biggest portion and line item of the federal budget very soon. But I think that short-term numbers that we look at right now belie the reality that we're going to have a reckoning. I think that reckoning is likely going to, the timing of these things is hard to predict, but I think that likely reckoning 2024 could be a pretty good prediction for when that's coming.
But that's not just an economic story. I mean, people have psychologically, I think, a very hard time moving backward.
Yes.
Right? It's one thing to be poor. It's another thing to be poor having been rich.
Yes.
Very hard for people to metabolize that.
Mm-hmm.
And so if that happens to hundreds of millions of people at the same time, people get radical.
Especially against the backdrop of already having deep distrust.
Right.
In my opinion, appropriately deep distrust in our existing institutions, including the government in this country. And so I think there are two ways this could break. Right? Sometimes you go through hardship and you're strengthened by that hardship. I'm just thinking about it as an individual in my life. Like I've gone through a hardship in my life. My father's been through hardship. In each of those cases, that led us to become stronger for having gone through that and did things that we otherwise would have never done, created things in the world that otherwise would have never existed. And that's the positive version of this. And it's the version I want to see for our country. But there's a very different way this could break too. I think that if we don't channel that frustration in a direction that creates something anew, right? A sort of reincarnation of our American experiment, which is what's going to be required. Then I think this ends the way that many other revolutions do, is not the creative kind, but the destructive kind. And I think the economic collapse that I think calamity, that I think recession at least that's coming, could just be the catalyst. We'll blame it on, that'll be the final match that's lit, but it's the kerosene on the floor that we have to pay attention to in the meantime. And that's why I think when people ask me, are you a culture issues guy, or are you an economy guy, or are you focused on foreign policy? It's missing the point. These things are each symptoms of a deeper
They're
place.
of a piece. There's no doubt.
No doubt about it.
So you said something when I saw you in Iowa earlier this summer. You said something really, really interesting about donors. And you are an interesting figure because you're effectively from the donor class. You're a rich guy running for president. Now you're dealing with donors from the other side. And you said that your views on Ukraine had given a lot of them pause.
Yes. There's no doubt that I have lost otherwise willing and interested donors or potential mega donors to my campaign over my position on Ukraine, which is fascinating because I don't think there's any particular self-interest at issue. It's not like somebody saying, oh, well, I own, a big chunk of Raytheon or something like that, and I'm going to have my interests harmed. Therefore, I'm not going to back you because that will harm my self-interest. That'd be an easy and fun and facile explanation, but that's not what's going on. I think there is a deeper bipartisan institutional consensus, the same consensus that said we can't be told the truth about 9/11, that effectively says that we can't confront some of the same facts about Ukraine. And I try not to be reactive, Tucker, because it is a natural impulse where,
Of course.
at least the way I'm wired is, if somebody tells you not to do something, there's almost a natural temptation to go in that direction.
Right.
So I would like to think, and I believe my position here is grounded in fact and not that reactive emotion, but it's interesting that it makes me doubly committed to making sure that I'm really speaking the truth about what's going on here, at least because it means that the rest of the field absolutely is not. Right. I mean, the rest of
that's kind of
the entire
question.
Republican field, not one of them. I mean, Donald Trump, we could say he wants to end the war. He hasn't said exactly how, but save for Trump, right? Nobody on the debate stage, certainly for the Republican Party, has a principled position on Ukraine, partly because they understand those are the directions they've been given.
So you think it's interesting because there are a couple of fairly smart, I know them, people running for president right now in the Republican field whose positions on Ukraine are like idiotic.
Or indiscernible.
Right. They don't even make sense.
Some are idiotic. The idiotic one is just we have to arm them to the teeth, give them as much money as possible because we stand with Ukraine. The indiscernible ones are the ones where they'll tell you one thing and then they'll tell their donors one thing and then they don't know where they actually stand because they're being buffeted.
But that's the effect of donor pressure. Right.
It is. It really is. It really is. Absolutely. I mean, I think that there's, I think there's finger in wind candidates. And I think that that exists. So there's finger and wind candidates on Ukraine, but I think that there are also separately candidates who just believe that this is the way that we do things in the United States of America. We don't stop until we have taken down what we have decided is our enemy, forgetting that the USSR doesn't exist anymore and believe that that's the only source of victory. And so my view, I start from a different premise, and there's pros and cons, right? On one hand, I don't have national ads running because my super PAC affiliated with me is tiny compared to those affiliated with, other candidates in this race that have television ads blaring and lifting their numbers up in the polls because they're buying a bunch of TV ads. The flip side is I'm unconstrained by what I'm able to say. And that allows me to speak truth that a lot of people in this country recognize to be the truth, which is that we have no discernible national interest at issue in Ukraine.